Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Swede Rolls. I'm Chris.
And I'm Martin.
And today, Martin, we're going to be talking about...
what we call the Burr Principle.
Yes, and if you think that name is stupid, we just invented it.
And it's quite stupid.
Yeah, it is. But we felt that hooks, as is the usual term for these kind of things, doesn't cover it. It's too passive.
And for the listeners who don't know what a burr is, what is a burr?
A burr is a small pod, I believe, a seed pod of a plant that sticks to pretty much anything. When you walk through a field with your dog, for example, it sticks to your clothes, it sticks to the dog's fur, it sticks to anything that isn't completely smooth.
And this plant was the inspiration for Velcro.
Yes. Essentially tiny hooks that
Yeah.
hook into shit. That is the burr.
Yeah.
And you after this episode, you will definitely understand why we use that instead of a hook.
Christian, what is the Burr Principle?
The Burr Principle is creating elements in a role-playing game that sticks to stuff. It is involving, sometimes forcibly, other players into events, into NPCs, that's non-player characters, into essentially the story. It is something that happens that involves everyone and can involve everyone. A lot of times when you create a character, you have a past written out or rolled up in some cases, but this past is usually not alive. It's not always relevant to the story at hand, and a common qualification for a good GM is someone who can bring this into relevance. What we'd consider the Burr Principle here to be that if I have a past involving a cult, for example, that I might have been a member of and left, this cult doesn't just have to follow me. It is a self-existing organism within this world, and it doesn't just focus on me. Maybe someone else in the group is being approached to be recruited into this cult. Essentially, it's kind of bringing cooperative elements into a role-playing game.
Because you say, there's the saying, no man's an island. But a lot of characters are indeed islands.
Absolutely.
So they have no connections.
Yeah.
And this is, I would say, the Burr Principle is about building bridges.
Yeah.
A lot of bridges,
Yes.
like throwing hook shots to other islands and just kind of connecting and building that net that makes a character come to life.
Like a neural network.
Yeah, like a neural network. And I think if you're role players, you have all been in this situation where you have a lot of characters, especially in the beginning of a campaign or a session or something, where they have almost no interaction with each other, and the game master really has to go out of his or her way to just kind of knit you together, to just forcibly say that you are in this tavern because you were all mystically invited.
You found an ad.
Yeah, and it's we're gonna talk about a name. Let the person be unnamed.
Yeah.
But let's talk about an old player in our gaming group.
Yeah.
Who had the bad habit of creating, I would say, realistic characters.
Yes.
Now you might think, aren't we for realism?
Yeah.
Aren't we usually talking about we want more realism and this isn't real and everything? And yes, usually we do.
Yeah.
But we are not actually, we never want realism.
No.
We do want internal logic.
Yeah.
That's what we want in games and media and everything. We don't want no realism because we live in the real world. We don't want that.
No.
So this player in our group had the bad habit, as we said, of creating really realistic characters who usually tried to react realistically to what was happening, which means if there was a loner character, that character was always alone and never talking to people,
exactly.
which was completely in character and completely realistic and boring.
Yes. Because one of the very common concepts in improvisational theater is the concept of yes and, which is essentially that no comedy or nothing ever happens if you shoot people down. If someone is giving you a line in improvisational comedy or improvisational theater, they want you to build on that because that makes it funny. And if you just shoot something down, or if you say, nah, I'm not interested in that, you're just burning that connection. You're cutting that connection. And you can't weave a story out of that. So if there's a loner character, then that character might have to sacrifice some of its realism and be more approaching to another player. Maybe they see something in their past in this person. Maybe they go, oh, you remind me of my dead brother. That's why I'm a loner, because my brother died and it was my fault. So I'm going to take you under my wing, or something like that.
And of course you could, and this would be great role-playing, to have a loner character who you, as an off player, use the Burr Principle and hook yourself into other characters, but then you play like you hate it because you want to be alone.
Or maybe you're a character like Rorschach in Watchmen, and you are a loner and you don't trust any of the other players, so you consistently get involved in their business somehow. You spy on them, or you conspire against them. Anything that just involves the other player.
Our basic definition, I would say, about role-playing games concerning the Burr Principle is that there is a cooperative story.
Yes.
So whatever you thought about the story of your character and how it's going to progress, that's just one tiny piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And realistically, your passion and your future and thought of your character is not going to come to fruition.
No.
It's probably going to be twisted and torn, and as there's several people in the group, there's not going to be room for your solo adventure.
No.
Or your solo career. That's just how it's going to be. It's going to have to be together with other people, because otherwise no one's going to want to play with you.
Exactly. And we mentioned it briefly last podcast, and I'm going to just skip down to a little list we prepared to the bottom there.
Yeah.
Because I think a major obstacle in any role-playing game is that you consider yourself a player. That the other participants are players, and playing automatically assumes that there's a game. And a lot of games, the goal is to win. And in a lot of games, the goal is to win. Classic Dungeons & Dragons was getting to the bottom of the dungeon and getting to treasure and killing the big monster. But in the role-playing games we do, you have a lot of us, we just prioritize the story, the narrative, the fiction, and the group, the development of this story. And I am absolutely convinced that we're not the only ones out there who do this. And if you are in a situation where the story is the most important, maybe you should reevaluate what is a victory to you. Because if the victory is that you get everything you want, go home and write your own story. But if the victory is that you go through a very unreliable, very a story that you don't automatically see the end to, that's fun. That's like reading a book, right? So that's more fun if you're with other people, in my opinion.
Yeah. And this is, as you're saying, becoming actor instead of a player. That means that you do take responsibility, just not for your own character and that character development, but also realizing that you have an active responsibility to be a part of the character development of other players. And now you might ask yourself, how is this going to be done? How do you do this specifically? So we're gonna give you an example on how this can be done.
Several different examples, actually, starting with the world building, if that's what you're thinking about.
No, no, but sure. We're just gonna add on.
We can start with the world building, maybe.
We start with the world building,
and sorry for hijacking.
Sure.
But we've mentioned before, Varangia, your custom setting.
Yeah.
And we have an unconventional way of starting a campaign, in that we sit down together and we brainstorm what exactly do we want to play, which we're not going to go too much into depth with that. But in the entire process, the first role-playing session, we just hash out ideas. I don't think we ever go truly in character. It's more like we're gods of a narrative that construct the setting. We're like the carpenters and the script writers for a story. Not even the script writers, but essentially we build the foundation on what we're going to be playing later. And that involves people. And if you're using the Burr Principle here, you're just tossing ideas. There's not the idea of winning at this point. You can't even imagine winning because you don't even have a character yet. So we are in a completely different state of mind where we build what would be an interesting narrative, and then what kind of characters can we fit into this narrative.
And you come there, I would say, into when you're building a world and you're trying to fit in a character in there, you often come to like a path in that character's development, and you could make several choices. And I would say that most people they say that, oh, I want to get to the point where the character makes the decision for me, and I could really understand that, but I want to rephrase that to that you have a character who has an ambition that drives the choice, but you as the driving actor or player could just kind of direct that a little bit. Just it's a huge wave behind you, but you could just put down a little rudder and just steer it a bit to left and a bit to the right. Because if you are completely internalized, it is so easy for your character to just choose a path that just leads right out into the darkness, alone and outside of the common story. But if you just use that moment, you built up the momentum of your character. It wants something, it needs something, it's going to do something. And often you have several choices, and you could just, by tweaking that natural choice a little bit, you can just hook on and just use the Burr Principle, just latch on to several factions, characters, world events, former NPCs, something just kind of pulling something in again.
And I have an example of computer role-playing games here. If you look at a game like Baldur's Gate, or if you look at a game like Planescape, it's very clear that you are the main character. You're the one the story is about. And the other NPCs have some small parts where you can watch their world. You can observe their world as if they were the main character. But it is a little bit shallow. And I think other games handle this better. I don't know if you played Final Fantasy VII, but
I have.
And that is a game that has a pretty well fleshed out background for most of the characters, where it's not relevant. You are not a relevant key player in a lot of these people's lives up until now. So they actually do feel alive. And the advantage of role playing is that these NPCs aren't actually NPCs. They're other people. So you can consistently take from them and give to them and add inspiration to them. Which is you're basically, a lot of people compare the human body to people fixing a car while it's running at 90 miles an hour. How cells fix themselves and fix the body. I'd say that role-playing our way is kind of like that. You're building a story while you're going through it. Which can at times be stressful, and sometimes you just go into a wall and die, but then you respawn, and you continue with the story.
Yeah, and it also gives you, especially as a game master, the interesting task of going backwards in time and try to create the reason why stuff happens, because you have to have those reasons now, but you didn't know them then. And still, I think we're still not really touching on how we do this practically. So I'm just going to give an example from the last time that we played, or like the two last sessions that we played in the current Varangia campaign. And there we do have a player, Victor is the player name. He is a magician. And he's had a kind of rough background because there's a lot of background concerning the usage of magic in the world.
A fairly new concept in Varangia.
Yes. He has, for some reason, because we rolled and used, as we talked so many times before, we used the Eon system for kind of creating strange tidbits of the character's background. And Victor got the background that he was a leader of a unknown cult, and then he spun up that he wanted to lead someone in the swamp. That there's a huge swamp around the city, and we also had the like a mutation plague. So we decided it would be fun to just lead some mutated animals. So he's actually leading he's a cult leader.
A religious cult leader of mutated lizard
crocodiles.
Crocodiles, who have formed a very basic kind of tribal civilization.
Yeah. And so that's the situation. He's controlling this cult of these very trusting, huge crocodile
which
mutants.
we could spend an entire episode discussing.
Yeah, but we're not going to do that now.
We're not going to do that now.
Now we're going to talk about how Victor is true to the Burr Principle. There is, for the majority of the group, there is an upcoming event. There's a boat race, a regatta.
Yes.
And he knows that you as a group, you're going to that regatta, and it's going to be important, and it's going to be a lot of important people there. And from his backstory, also his ex-girlfriend is going to be there, and she is racing one of the boats.
And she's probably a better racer than he is.
Yeah, he's not going to race, but he wants to just publicly humiliate her. So, okay, if you're a character and you want to publicly humiliate your ex-girlfriend in the game,
because we've never been in.
No, sure.
Yes.
Then he could either do the loner perspective, and he could just say, "Oh, I want to go off with the game master, and I want to do this and that, and it's going to take place entirely outside of the story." But no, Victor, instead then, using internal logic but not necessarily realism, decides that he's going to use his mutant crocodile cult. Oh, I like that word.
Mutant crocodile cult,
So, and he says that he gives them the holy mission of destroying her boat at the regatta. Because Victor he knows that they're going to be there, and it's going to be important, so it's going to create drama.
Yeah.
It's going to create even more little hooks.
It would not be the ideal solution for his character.
No. But it's going to be the ideal solution for the gaming.
Yeah,
for the story, for the narrative.
Because it will be a memorable scene. It has an element of chaos to it.
Unbeknownst to Victor, has the other characters, they have already been in contact with his ex-girlfriend, and they're trying to patch them up because they want to get invited to this regatta because it's a big social thing. And they do get the invitations that they've tried to get on the basis that Victor's character is going to go there, he's going to be in her boat, and he's going to say he's sorry. And the rest of the characters are, of course, promising this without having talked to Victor at all.
As it usually is.
Yes, and they are doing this and going along with and saying that, he could do it at the regatta, because they're after knowing that he's already put up the mutant crocodile cult to go there. So also internally logical, but maybe not the most realistic way, they're putting even another notch of drama into that next session that we're going to play very soon.
Yeah.
So that's the Burr Principle, for example, in action.
A very good example. I'm thinking of other situations where the Burr Principle has happened. And I can think of a few situations where it has failed, where we haven't done this. I think we had a long tradition of going into the kitchen and talking with the GM. And it wasn't a bad system. It created a lot of interesting tension and drama because you never knew what was going on in the kitchen. It was probably pretty boring for the GM because he had to spend most of his time in the kitchen. But we had this political game. And at that specific period of time, we actually focused a lot more on each other. That was much more relevant to us than the rest of the world we played in, which I think actually could be, it's kind of an evolution of our gameplay. And we finally sort of stepped away from that when we feel comfortable also in knowing that other people know what we're planning. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That system essentially created, I think it's kind of a version of the Burr Principle where you had to respond to stuff going on. It wasn't blocking shit happening that players had to react to. It added an element of mystery to it, and spontaneity, and you had to react to that. But I believe the narrative took a hit from it, because I think if you're in a group that's playing on this kind of game, when you consider yourselves actors instead of players, if I can say that, you should have the understanding that this is a game, this is a story, this isn't a game to win. So even if I, the actor, let's say that, know what you, Martin, the actor, your character's planning, there's a kind of a perverse pleasure in watching your characters suffer through it. Because the best kind of comedy, the crucial kind of comedy, is seeing a banana peel on the ground and seeing someone carrying a stack of crates or cakes walking towards this banana peel, because you know what's going to happen. You don't want to stop it because you want to see it happen. I'm already laughing from this stupid mental image, but that is a kind of a crucial sort of comedy. It doesn't hurt anyone, of course. They're made up characters. And I think I was going to mention Apocalypse World very briefly. I've tried GMing it a little bit since we talked about it last. It is a very interesting game because it's trying to create a system for this. It's trying to explain this way of playing in a very... It kind of feels like a gateway drug to this, from Dungeons and Dragons to this kind of liberated actor-based role-playing. It has a connection system, which I think is brilliant. You sit with your characters and you go, which one of you fuckers stabbed me in the back? I think we mentioned this before. And then you also kind of ask questions to these players. If you are, if you're the head of a gang, for example, what kind of gang are you? Why are you there? Where did you get your guns from? What's your usual problems? How does this gang act? And we're creating a world which is essentially a large city after the catastrophe. And one of our players, after a nuclear explosion, essentially. So this is the city, the ruins of the city is all that remains for people. Outside of the city is death. So one of the players had a big problem with this because nothing was very well defined. We were creating the world as we were going. And I'm used to this because we're playing Varangia, which essentially everything that's not decided yet doesn't exist. And if it does have to exist, we create it. Almost sometimes on the spot, sometimes with some planning. But this kind of gameplay requires you to be comfortable with the idea of not being in control and not being able to do research on the game. If there is a school of magic that didn't exist before, suddenly it exists, and it has always existed. Yeah. And that is a very hard concept to work with. And it really can be really frustrating. This player was very frustrated with the whole situation, and I understand them. They're not used to this. I do believe, however, that it can be mitigated by dialing it back and going, okay, maybe it won't be as deep with the characters in the beginning because we don't know everything, but I think in the long run, this kind of evolution in role playing is healthy.
Yeah, I definitely, because I think there's a knowing that you're not in control and that you're not knowing everything in the world you're playing, the role playing game in. I would say that's essentially just drawing away the blinds, because you're always in that situation.
Yeah.
As
you're looking behind the curtains.
Yeah, but because either how fleshed out the world is, hundreds, you could have written a role-playing game for hundreds of years, it would still be a lot less real than our real world. So all role-playing games subside on the every player's suspension of belief of just a few key sets of information. Yeah. So I think it's just facing the reality to do it the way we do.
So I'm gonna be just a little bit of a spoiler here, but the Dragon Empire, or the Draconic Empire, or the Inheritors as I call them, which is the civilization that David's character comes from. Okay. They're gonna play a crucial role in the development of the story. Very heavily inspired by a game I've been playing recently, and essentially they are They're going to be sort of a Roman Empire-esque idea, not the most creative or imaginative twist, but I got this inspiration partly from the players, partly from thinking, okay, right now this world is so underdeveloped because we're playing in my setting, and I wanted to establish some crucial facts. And the problem with this is that how do I handle this kind of development when David barely knows anything, not to his fault, it's mine, about this culture? So I'm going to start next session by having a flashback for every player in their old setting,
and
where they were before they came here.
And that's a good way to just ground and keep people in.
Yeah.
And I also think you're talking about another way, very important for the game master to really involve the player characters' pasts.
Yeah.
And more than that, to make all of their actions in some way count.
Yeah.
Either past actions from their past, just if they have invented something in their background, or probably want that to affect the game in some way.
Yeah.
And the same thing, I try to really pick up on things that the characters during play sessions do or say, or choices. I'm obsessed with choices. I try to make all choices, or at least the slightly larger ones, in a way get consequences. And that's a way of just using the Burr Principle.
Yeah.
What you do is hooking people on. It gets consequences.
Yeah.
And it's consequences that get back at you and further the drama.
Yeah.
You reject someone, then it happens something with that person, and that person maybe either they do give you they start talking behind your back, and we started a problem with your reputation, or they come back and want to revenge or something. We just don't. It just doesn't pass you like sitting on a train and just swoops by you.
And it can sometimes be hard if you're an inexperienced GM, or if you're not used to these kind of play styles. Like, for example, Daniel he just took this post boy, this letter boy that I just had delivered a message to him, and he essentially made him his squire / I'm gonna make a man out of you. And I found myself in a situation where, like, okay, this is one NPC out of the 20 I've planned that I have no idea who he is. And it was hard. It was really hard to act on that. And that I think that's one of my biggest flaws, is that if I haven't thought about it, I find it hard to play. But if I do think too much about it, it's even harder to play. So this kind of mental gymnastics balance of going, okay, I have the general guidelines out, but what's going to happen in between, that's just going to happen. And letting loose and just tossing out these burrs, because if you toss a burr into a bunch of people, it's going to stick to someone, maybe even more than one person. One thing I wanted to ask you and talk to you about, Martin, is you mentioned giving the players what they want and the threat of having it taken away.
Yeah, I think there is two things to that. The first is just giving the characters a meaning.
Yeah.
Giving the characters a meaning. If you have created a ninja, you do want to be able to play a ninja for at least sometimes in the story. Otherwise, why would you have made a ninja?
Yeah.
So if you have a fighter, if you have a intriguer, something what they are passionate about, they have to get the chance to do it. And when people, one of the reasons I've heard why you shouldn't let them do that is because they have built the character often being good at that thing. That's their past. And I think, what's the problem with them being good at it?
And this thinking goes back to power gaming and stuff like that. But if you put Bruce Banner in a game, that fucker's going to turn into the Hulk at some point. You can't just not have Bruce Banner, and you can't have Bruce Banner and not the Hulk.
No.
That's his thing.
And people, they're going to tire if they're not going to do their thing. Or you could also do this by pointedly not making them do their thing.
Absolutely.
A ninja that is never allowed to be a ninja.
Yeah.
But then you have to really openly acknowledge that, that you're forced entirely to
tension there.
and that's a great campaign.
Yeah.
But you can't just let it slide, just toss it under the rug. And when people say, oh, they shouldn't get what they want, I always say, well, I think it's perfect. I try to always give them what they want, what they strive for. And I just love to give people what they want, because when you get that thing, you desperately want to keep it.
Exactly.
And that gives me, as a game master, so much more to immediately. I could see the players getting happy, getting what they want, and what they strive for, and then comes the fear, the fear of losing something. And well, immediately we do have something to, and the more you have, the more you have to lose.
Exactly.
Because I think it's strange that you so often play role-playing campaigns where the characters are essentially tied to nothing. They have almost nothing to lose. They carry everything they own on their backs. And I feel like, how do you create drama with this group? Because they what do they want?
Yeah, they're like the Snufkin in Moomin.
Yeah.
They don't have any cares.
No, and they could always, you have to artificially try them to get into adventures, because why would they?
Yeah. It is a concept that once you start to apply logic to fantasy Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing, it kind of starts breaking apart to different levels.
Yeah, of course, because I was talking before that we don't want realism, but we do want internal logic. And I just think that if you have characters having something that they want to keep. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, look at the character Priska that we talked about last time. She got what she wanted. She got rid of Marius. She became her own boss, kind of, sort of. And then for a little while, she was worried. And then all of a sudden, her ambition just it grew, and she was like, I want more. I want more. And that's also a very interesting motivator. If the character gets what they want, all of a sudden their entire order of priority, if you want to look at Maslow's ladder or stairs, pyramid of needs, you start out with something very basic. But once that need is fulfilled, what's my other need? Yeah. And what's my other need?
And very basically, if you get really, really rich, of course, there's things that you can solve with wealth. But wealth comes with its own enemies. Yeah. For example, other adventurers trying to steal your wealth.
Yeah. And and let's say, for example, that you are an experienced adventurer, a well-renowned warrior, and you settle down in a town. There's going to be people coming there either trying to recruit you, or they're going to try to kill you, or they're, who's got time for that shit? You leave an impact on the world around you, and the more fame you get, the more people know about you, and the more fame will the person who kills you get. Yeah. Like, there's always a downside to everything. And that also, as a player, as an actor, being able to accept that and being like, okay, with great power comes great responsibility. Clearly, my character is very independent, very self-reliant. That means that is what's at risk. And other people are going to rely on me. Other characters are going to rely on me. And if we want to go to one of the last things that I wanted to talk with you about is the turning a player character into a non-player character. Because this is a very common thing in Varangia. Players move on. We drop our characters, either because there's been 10 years past, or because we don't feel comfortable with them, or we just decide to try something else. And you keep them alive, Martin.
Yeah, I do. Because it's mainly it's some kind of a reward for service.
Yeah. You get to join the roster of NPCs.
Yes, but it's also a very selfish reason that I think that I would have to build those. There's a lot of hours invested in every character, and I would be mad to invest as much in every NPC. Yeah. So I'm not doing that. So I'm just gonna take that a piece of gold just lying there and just put it to use. And all the connections that character has done, that the player has done,
comes with it.
Yeah, it comes with it.
Yeah.
And you have the fantastic moments where the players get to reap what they sow.
Yeah.
Where they're building that hard ass, badass police, and then the next campaign that they're criminals. And then suddenly, when their last character is put on their tracks, they know that, oh man, that is a capable character. And if that is a really good character, perhaps, and maybe that has special abilities and everything, if I were just to make that up, some of the players might feel that, oh, that's a really good NPC, but now they have the responsibility for making that monster.
And if you look at movies, if you especially look at Star Wars, for example, Star Wars has an ensemble cast, very, very easily recognized characters: Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Darth Vader, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, R2-D2, and C-3PO. They appear almost consistently through all different Star Wars mediums. And they play important roles in the role-playing games based on them. Because that's how you can relate to the world, through these important characters. They portray different aspects of this world. Han Solo is kind of the stand-in for the smuggler. Your only idea of how smuggling works in this universe is through Han Solo. The typical Sith warrior is Darth Vader. So obviously everything is in relation to this character. If I create a character who is a brothel keeper, then she serves as a template for how this kind of thing might work, with some variations in. And with the extra bonus of, oh shit, I haven't seen this character in 4 years. I wonder what's happened.
Yeah, and I think you're putting your finger on something very important, because that is when you creating your own world or fleshing out a world of your own, or taking someone else and making it your own. Because I would say as soon as you start playing anything, it's your world. It's not the creations. It's not from a book. It's not from a game. It's your world.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the interesting things when we chose new campaign settings or new themes that we want to play, is that it is always a part of the world that is, oh, I wonder how that works, because now that we're gonna play in it, we have to invent how it works. And I think that's one.
Exactly. So it's keep your characters around, even if you don't like the character you made. Hand them to the GM and go do something with this guy or girl. Or
remember the Burrs. They stick to you.
Yeah.
You try to walk them off, but they stick.
There's
to
always
you.
At least one sticking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where the sun don't shine.
Burrs also stick to each other and build like
blobs of burrs.
Blobs.
Yeah. So that is the Burr Principle.
The Burr Principle.
And 5 minutes after this, we're going to go online and see that this has already been used.
Well,
in which case, there is a backup name, which is the Swedish Burr Principle. No, jokes aside, I think, I hope people find a use for this kind of idea, because when you look at things in that way, puzzling it together becomes so much easier.
Maybe you could send us some examples out of your play when you have used this.
I would love to read that.
Or when you have done such a thing and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Or when you're thinking about someone, and maybe I'm putting myself in a really strange position here. We could give you some advice.
Yeah.
Or you could just tell us how we should do things.
Tell you what, if through this entire podcast you were jumping up and down going, oh, I recognize this, I have an example of this, just write it up, send it to us. We're swedefighters@gmail.com. Our website is swederolls.com. But email works as well. And just tell us. We're going to do an episode about it, and we'll talk about them.
Sure.
I'd love to do that.
Me too.
Yeah.
So send in some fun ones.
Yeah, you better. And until then, or at least until next time, keep rolling.
Keep rolling, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Swede Rolls. Your support means the world to us. The music you heard playing at the start and the end of this episode is Fireside Tales by Darren Curtis. The intent of this podcast is to discuss themes and issues in all manner of gaming, but primarily focused on the RPG genre. If you have any comments or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Pay us a visit at swederolls.com, where you can also learn about the people doing this podcast and more. For our Let's Play channel, check us out at youtube.com/Swede_Fighters. And until next time, keep rolling.